William wasn't supposed to see the listing. It had never been publicly connected to the royal family. No palace announcement, no official sale, just a private jewelry listing circulating among a small group of collectors. Then one photograph stopped him cold. A pearl and sapphire piece. William had seen it before. On Diana. Within minutes, his advisors were checking the photographs against old family records. The match looked disturbingly close. But the biggest shock came when William demanded to know who had placed the jewelry on the market. The seller wasn't an auction house. It wasn't Diana's estate. And it wasn't one of William's relatives. The trail appeared to lead to Camilla's daughter. William's first reaction was disbelief, then anger. But instead of making a public accusation, he gave one order. Stop the sale. Nobody touches anything until we know how she got it. Because William immediately understood something everyone else was missing. Catching someone selling Diana's jewelry wasn't the real scandal. The real scandal would be discovering how Diana's jewelry had crossed from one side of the family to the other without anyone noticing. And when Camilla's daughter finally produced the document, she said, proved the jewelry was hers. William saw one name at the bottom that changed the entire investigation. Before we reveal what William discovered on that document, hit like, subscribe, and tell us, which city are you watching from? William wasn't looking for Diana's jewelry. In fact, the listing reached him almost by accident. An advisor had been reviewing a private sale involving several high-value pieces when one photograph caught his attention. He placed the image in front of William. Sir, you may want to see this. William barely reacted at first. Pearls, a sapphire centerpiece, an elegant setting. Then he looked again. His expression changed. Where did this come from? The advisor explained that the piece was being offered privately to collectors. William pulled the photograph closer. He remembered that design, not from the palace vault, from photographs of his mother. Diana had worn something almost identical. Check it. Within minutes, old photographs were being compared with the listing. The pearl arrangement matched. The sapphire matched. Even a distinctive detail around the clasp appeared identical. William stood up. Who's selling it? The advisor hesitated. That hesitation told William the answer mattered. Who? A name was placed in front of him. William stared at it. Camilla's daughter. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then came the order everyone expected to sound furious. It didn't. Stop the sale. William refused to accuse anyone of stealing. Not yet. He wanted provenance records, ownership documents, photographs, everything. How did she get it? Nobody knew. Then that's what we find out. A lawyer immediately contacted the private intermediary. But minutes later, he returned with news that changed the urgency completely. Sir, there's a complication. William looked up. What complication? The lawyer placed the transaction sheet on the desk. The jewelry wasn't simply being advertised. A buyer had already been selected. A price had been agreed. And beside the transaction was one line William hadn't expected to see. Deposit received. William's face hardened. How long until the sale completes? The lawyer checked the document, then looked up. Tomorrow morning. William didn't wait until morning. Freeze it tonight. The lawyers immediately contacted the intermediary handling the private transaction. No transfer, no collection, and most importantly, the jewelry was not to leave secure storage. Within the hour, confirmation arrived. The sale had been suspended, but the buyer wasn't happy. Neither was Camilla's daughter. She contacted the palace, demanding to know why William had interfered in a private transaction involving property she believed belonged to her. William agreed to meet. When she arrived, she wasn't apologetic. She was angry. You had no right to stop that sale. William remained calm. If the jewelry is yours, the sale will continue. She stared at him. And if it isn't, then we find out how it reached you. That answer changed the room. William wasn't accusing her of theft. He wanted the ownership trail. Camilla's daughter opened her bag and removed a folder. I knew you'd ask. She placed an old document in front of him. It described several pieces of jewelry transferred into private family possession years earlier. The pearl and sapphire piece appeared by description. There was even an authorization signature. For the first time, William seemed uncertain. The lawyer examined it. Paperwork, reference numbers, transfer language. Everything appeared legitimate. Camilla's daughter leaned back. "That's how I got it." William said nothing. Then he noticed the date. He looked at the signature. Back at the date. Something wasn't right. Who authorized this? She pointed toward the name at the bottom. William knew the name. So did the lawyer. The room suddenly became very quiet. William pushed the document across the table. Check when this person held that position. The lawyer opened the administrative records. Seconds later, his expression changed. "What?" He turned the screen toward William. The official whose signature supposedly authorized the transfer had left that role months before the document was dated. William looked back at Camilla's daughter. She appeared genuinely confused. Then he asked the question that opened an entirely new mystery. "Who gave you this document?" Camilla arrived before William could get an answer. She had already heard the sale had been frozen, and she wasn't pleased. "What exactly are you accusing my daughter of?" William looked up. "Nothing." Camilla stopped. "You blocked the sale." "I blocked a transaction involving jewelry that may not belong to the seller." Camilla's expression hardened. "My daughter has documents proving those pieces were transferred legally." William slid the transfer paper across the table. "Then explain this." Camilla read it. At first, she saw nothing unusual. Then William pointed toward the signature. The official named at the bottom had supposedly authorized the transfer on that date. There was one problem. He had already left that position months earlier. Camilla looked toward her daughter. "Where did you get this?" "I don't remember. It came with the jewelry." William watched her carefully. She didn't look caught. She looked confused. That mattered. Camilla turned back toward William. "You're still treating this as though she did something wrong." "No." William's voice remained controlled. "I'm trying to find out who did." Then Camilla said something nobody expected. "Charles knew about those pieces." William froze. "What?" Camilla explained that years earlier, several boxes of personal belongings had been redistributed between private households. Charles had seen some of the jewelry. As far as Camilla understood, there had never been any question that the pieces were legitimately transferred. William immediately asked for Charles. When Charles arrived, William placed a photograph of the pearl and sapphire piece in front of him. "Do you recognize this?" Charles stared at it. His expression slowly changed. "Yes." Camilla leaned forward. "See?" But William noticed Charles wasn't looking at Camilla. He was looking at the jewelry. "Did you authorize this going to her daughter?" Charles looked up. "No." Silence. Camilla's face changed instantly. "But you knew she had it." Charles shook his head. "I knew I'd seen it before." William leaned closer. "Where?" Charles hesitated, then answered what nobody in the room wanted to hear. "In one of Diana's boxes." The room went completely silent. In one of Diana's boxes. William stared at Charles. "What box?" Charles sat down slowly. He remembered the period clearly. Not every piece, not every document, but the confusion. After Diana's death, personal belongings have been separated, cataloged, moved, and stored across different locations. Some went directly into protected family storage. Others were temporarily placed alongside household possessions while administrators determined where they belonged. Charles remembered seeing the pearl and sapphire piece inside one of those containers. William pushed the sale photograph toward him. "You're certain?" Charles studied it again. "As certain as I can be." Camilla looked disturbed. "Then how did it end up with my daughter?" Nobody answered. That was now the central question. William turned toward the archivist. "Find every transfer made from those boxes." The search began immediately. Old storage records were retrieved. Box numbers, movement sheets, household inventories. William followed the trail until one number suddenly disappeared. D17. What happened to this box? The archivist searched again. It had left temporary storage with several other containers during a household reorganization. But unlike the others, D17 had no completed destination record. Camilla's daughter leaned forward. "Are you saying somebody gave me an entire box of Diana's belongings?" "No, we don't know that." Then an advisor produced an inventory attached to D17. William began reading. Scarves, personal accessories, 2 jewelry cases. Then he stopped. Pearl and sapphire piece. Same description, same distinguishing clasp. Same jewelry, now frozen in the private sale. Camilla stared at the page. Her daughter looked genuinely shaken. I never knew. William believed that was possible, but another detail bothered him. The inventory showed 3 jewelry items inside D17. William looked toward the sale records. The private listing contained 3 pieces. He compared them. 1, 2, 3. Every item matched. William slowly closed the folder. This was no longer about one suspicious brooch. Camilla's daughter appeared to have received an entire group of jewelry that had once been cataloged among Diana's personal effects. And now William needed to know whether those pieces had ever legally left Diana's estate. William placed the 3 sale photographs beside the D17 inventory. The match was impossible to ignore. 3 pieces listed in the box. 3 pieces offered for sale. But William still wasn't satisfied. This proves where they were stored. It doesn't prove who owned them. The archivist nodded. That distinction mattered. Diana had worn jewelry that belonged to different collections over the years. Simply finding something among her effects wasn't enough. William wanted the original classification. More records were brought in. Old insurance schedules, personal property inventories, household logs. Then the archivist found a separate jewelry register connected to D17. William opened it. The first item matched the pearl and sapphire piece. Beside it, personal property. The second item carried the same classification. Then the third. William slowly looked up. All three. Camilla's daughter stared at the documents. I was told they were mine. William looked at her. And you may have believed that. Camilla seemed surprised by his restraint. But William wasn't interested in finding someone convenient to blame. He wanted to know where the mistake began. The lawyer continued through the inventory. Then he stopped. There was handwriting beside the 3 jewelry entries. Faded, small, almost hidden beneath an administrative stamp. What does that say? The archivist brought the page beneath stronger light. William leaned closer. 3 words became visible. For the boys. Nobody spoke. William read them again. The boys. William and Harry. Camilla's daughter looked shaken. So, these were supposed to go to you? William didn't answer. Because the notation wasn't a legal inheritance document. It could be an instruction, a reminder, something written during the sorting process. He refused to claim more than the evidence proved. Find out who wrote it. Then the archivist noticed another reference beneath the words. A file number, an estate distribution record. William immediately asked for it. But when the file was retrieved, one page was missing. The exact page covering the 3 jewelry pieces. William stared at the empty sequence. Because someone had written for the boys, and the document explaining what that meant had vanished. The missing page changed everything. William looked at Camilla's daughter. I need you to tell me exactly how these pieces came into your possession. This time, she didn't argue. She sat down. Years earlier, she explained, several boxes of personal belongings had arrived during a household reorganization. Clothes, photographs, decorative objects, and one small jewelry case containing 3 pieces. Nobody told her they belonged to Diana. Nobody mentioned William, and nobody said the jewelry was being held temporarily. She had been told the items were part of a collection of personal effects that could be distributed within the family. William leaned forward. Who told you they were yours? She hesitated. I don't remember who physically handed me the box. William's expression tightened. But you eventually decided to sell them. Yes. Camilla immediately looked toward her daughter. Then came the detail nobody expected. But I asked first. William stopped. You asked who? Before listing the jewelry, she had contacted the office that originally handled the household records. She wanted confirmation that the pieces were legally hers to sell. An administrator checked the reference numbers. Days later, she received an answer. Approved for private disposal. Camilla turned toward William. So she didn't secretly sell anything. William said nothing. His anger was shifting. If she had genuinely asked for permission, and the palace had confirmed it, then the story was becoming far more complicated than anyone imagined. Show me the approval. She opened her phone. The old correspondence was still there. William read it carefully. The jewelry reference numbers matched. The authorization appeared official. Then he reached the signature at the bottom. He looked toward the advisor. Who is this? The advisor recognized the name immediately. A former palace administrator. Someone with access to the old property classifications. William stood. "Find him." Camilla watched him. "You still think my daughter did something wrong?" William looked at the 3 photographs of Diana's jewelry. Then, at the palace approval. "I'm beginning to think someone told her she had the right to do it." But when the former administrator's archived records were opened, William discovered the approval had been based on one altered classification. William stared at the altered classification. One line had changed everything. The 3 pieces from Diana's box had originally been recorded as. But years later, when the records were digitized, that classification had changed. The newer entry simply read. William looked toward the advisor. Who changed it? The archived records pointed to the former palace administrator who had later approved Camilla's daughter's request to sell the jewelry. Camilla immediately reacted. "So he knew?" "Not necessarily," William replied. He wasn't interested in making another accusation without evidence. The administrator was contacted. His explanation surprised everyone. He hadn't personally changed the original classification. When Camilla's daughter asked whether she could sell the jewelry, he simply searched the palace database. The system told him the pieces were privately owned and disposable. So he approved the sale. William's frustration grew. And nobody checked the original records? Apparently not. One incorrect entry had been trusted for years. The administrator trusted it. Camilla's daughter trusted his approval. And the auction intermediary trusted her ownership documents. William looked toward Camilla. "This didn't begin with your daughter." Camilla said nothing. William ordered every piece connected to D-17 frozen immediately. No sales. No transfers. Nothing left private storage until the original inventory had been reconstructed. Then an archivist entered carrying another report. His expression immediately concerned William. "What now?" The archivist placed a list on the table. D-17 hadn't contained only the 3 pieces currently being sold. There had originally been 4 jewelry items. William looked at the sale photographs. Where's the 4th? Nobody knew. The archivist checked the modern database, then stopped. The 4th item had received the same altered classification years earlier. But unlike the other 3, it was no longer in storage. William leaned forward. "Where is it?" The archivist swallowed. "It was sold." Silence. "When?" The date appeared on the screen. Years earlier. William's expression hardened. The current sale had been stopped just in time. But another piece connected to Diana had already disappeared into private hands. And now William had only one question. Who bought it? Everyone expected William to explode. One piece of jewelry connected to Diana had already been sold. The buyer was unknown. The original records had been misclassified. And Camilla's daughter had been preparing to sell 3 more. Camilla looked at William, waiting for the accusation. It never came. Instead, William turned toward the lawyers. Nobody blames her publicly. Camilla's daughter looked up. Even the advisors seemed surprised. William pointed toward the palace approval she had received. She asked whether she had the right to sell them. He paused. We told her yes. That was the part William couldn't ignore. She had relied on palace records. She had requested permission, and an administrator had confirmed that the jewelry was disposable private property. William's anger wasn't disappearing. It was changing direction. Find a mistake. Don't manufacture a villain. Camilla stared at him. You believe her? I believe the evidence. William ordered the 3 remaining pieces secured while their ownership was formally reviewed. Then he turned to the 4th item, the one already gone. Find the buyer. The old transaction records were searched. Eventually, a name appeared. A private collector had purchased the piece years earlier through an intermediary. William's lawyers contacted him discreetly. No threats, no public allegations, just a request to discuss the provenance. Hours passed. Then William's phone rang. The buyer was willing to cooperate, but he had something unexpected to tell them. When he purchased the jewelry, it hadn't arrived alone. There was an original presentation case, and inside that case, a handwritten note. William stood immediately. Does he still have it? The advisor nodded. The buyer had kept everything exactly as received. Jewelry, case, paperwork. and the folded note. William asked when it could be returned for examination. The answer came quickly. That evening, hours later, a small case was placed on William's table. He opened it. The missing piece was inside. Then he lifted the folded paper. One glance at the handwriting changed his expression. William knew it. It was Diana's. And the first line explained why these 4 pieces had been kept together. William didn't touch the jewelry first. His attention was fixed on the folded note. The handwriting looked unmistakably familiar. But after everything that had already gone wrong with the records, William refused to rely on recognition alone. Authenticated, the note was examined against Diana's verified correspondence. Handwriting, ink, paper. The preliminary comparison came back consistent. William finally opened it. The first line immediately explained why the 4 pieces had once been stored together. They weren't simply jewelry. They were a family group. Pieces Diana wanted preserved together rather than scattered through sales, gifts, or administrative transfers. Camilla's daughter looked stunned. "I was never shown this." William believed her. The buyer explained that the note had been hidden beneath the lining of the original case when he purchased the 4th piece. He hadn't understood its significance. He had simply kept it because it arrived with the jewelry. William continued reading. The note referred to her sons, to their future families, and to the possibility that these pieces might one day carry memories into a generation Diana would never personally know. Then William reached one sentence. He stopped. Camilla noticed. "What does it say?" William didn't answer immediately. He read it again. The wording referred to keeping certain pieces available for the women and daughters who would one day become part of her sons' families. William slowly lowered the paper. Nobody needed to say Charlotte's name. The implication was already hanging in the room. But William remained careful. "This doesn't automatically make anything Charlotte's." The lawyer nodded. The legal ownership still needed to be formally established. But the note did something equally important. It explained intent. These pieces had never been meant to drift into unrelated private sales. William looked toward Camilla's daughter. She appeared devastated. "I nearly sold all of them." William shook his head. "Because someone told you that you could." Then he turned toward the lawyers. "No punishment. No public accusation." Camilla looked surprised. William placed Diana's note beside the recovered jewelry. "Correct the records. Recover the pieces. Then find out exactly where they legally belong." Because William had finally understood the truth. The person standing in front of him wasn't necessarily the problem. The system that had put Diana's jewelry into her hand was. By now, everyone expected consequences. The sale had been stopped. Diana's missing jewelry had been traced. The 4th piece had been recovered. And Camilla's daughter was sitting across from William, knowing that 3 more pieces had almost disappeared into private hands. But William didn't call security. He didn't demand an apology. He didn't even raise his voice. Instead, he placed the palace authorization on the table. "You asked whether you could sell them." She nodded. "And the palace told you yes." "Yes." William looked toward the lawyers. "Then we're not punishing her for believing our mistake." Camilla stared at him. That wasn't the reaction she had expected. Neither had her daughter. William ordered the sale formally canceled and the buyer's deposit returned. The 4 jewelry pieces would remain together while lawyers determined their proper legal destination. Then he gave another instruction. Every record connected to Diana's D-17 box will be corrected. No more assumptions. No more unexplained transfers. No more family possessions becoming somebody else's simply because an incorrect database entry had survived long enough to look official. Camilla's daughter looked toward William. "I genuinely didn't know." William nodded. "I believe you." Then he pushed Diana's handwritten note toward her. "But this should never have reached you without someone knowing what it was." She looked down. "What happens to the jewelry now?" William glanced at Diana's words about her sons, their future families, and the daughters who might one day come after them. "Nothing," he said. "Not until we know exactly where it belongs." That answer mattered. William wasn't immediately handing everything to Charlotte. He wasn't claiming it himself. He was doing what the palace should have done years earlier, protecting it until the truth was established. The story had begun with what looked like an explosive betrayal. Camilla's daughter caught selling Diana's jewelry. But William's investigation uncovered a very different truth. She hadn't secretly taken Diana's possessions. She had been given them. She had asked permission to sell them. And the palace itself had said yes. William closed the jewelry case. His final decision shocked everyone because he refused to punish the easiest person to blame. Find whoever made the mistake, he said. But don't turn the person who inherited it into the villain.